When I moved to Fairmont, West Virginia, right in the middle of my 6th grade year, I just knew that my life was over. How was I supposed to make any friends right in the middle of the school year? By that time, everyone has usually already made friends and are part of some clique or group. My parents and I moved over winter break, the period between Christmas and New Year's when kids have off from school for almost 2 weeks, so I didn't even get to enjoy my vacation. When we pulled onto Brookside Drive, my eyes searched for any sign of kids my age. There were none. I expected to see kids sledding, building a snowman, or having an epic snowball fight, blasting each other in the face with snowballs, but the entire block was desolate. As we pulled into our driveway, I let out a sigh. Dad glances at me in the back seat with a smile and tells me, "Don't worry, kiddo. Everyone is probably just inside playing with their Christmas toys. They'll get tired of them before you know it." I got out of the car and stumbled my way through the snow to the trunk to help Dad with the boxes, while Mom unlocked the door. Then I grabbed 2 small boxes that were labeled bathroom and followed Dad into the house. I sat them down right inside the door and asked, "Where's my room?" Mom yells from wherever she is, "At the top of the stairs to the right." I race upstairs and towards the door that Mom specified. When I step inside and see how big it is, that cheers me up right away. Before moving here, we lived in a 2-bedroom duplex, and my room was only big enough to fit my twin-size bed, dresser, and saucer chair. This room was 3 times bigger than that. The sound of the doorbell chiming made me jump. I looked out the window and expected to see the moving truck out there, but Dad's car was still the only one in the driveway. Curious to see who it was, I darted back downstairs and was surprised to see a boy my age standing in the doorway with a man and woman. "This is my son Jonah," my dad says, introducing me. The man holds out his hand to shake mine, so I step forward and grasp it tightly, saying, "Nice to meet you, sir." He says that his name is Mr. Fullerton, but tells me to call him Richard. Then he introduces his wife Jill and his son Nathaniel. He tells us that they also have a 5-year-old daughter, but that she's home with a cold. "You can call me Nate," the boy informs me. I'm overjoyed when I find out that we are both new to the neighborhood, 12 and in the 6th grade. They just moved in a few days before us. They live a few houses down the block. My dad invites them to come inside, and Nate and I go upstairs to my room. I ask him what he likes to do, and he tells me that he likes to read and collect comic books. I tell him excitedly, "I'm a huge comic book fan too." Then I start to dig through some of my boxes and pull out one of my favorites, my collection of Teen Titans comics, and I lay them across my mattress. He stares in amazement and then approaches the bed. "These are awesome," Nate exclaims, full of excitement. We spend the next 30 minutes looking through the rest of my collection before the doorbell chimes again and my dad calls us back downstairs. "Are you guys hungry?" he asks while balancing a stack of pizza boxes in his left hand. We head to the kitchen and gather around the island. I grab a stack of paper plates and pass them around to everyone. Nate and I laugh when we both reach for the same slice of pepperoni pizza. His mom says, "Looks like you two have something in common." Nate replies, "Mom, he likes comics too. You should see his collection. Can I bring him over to show him mine?" She seems reluctant. "I don't know, Nate. Your sister isn't feeling too well, and the house is still a mess. We haven't even unpacked everything yet." He reminds her, "My room is already unpacked. We'll just stay in there. Please, Mom." Mr. Fullerton butts in and tells her, "Oh, honey, they won't be a problem. I'm sure they will spend the night in Nate's room reading comics. They'll stay out of the way while we unpack, and Grandma is there to help us with Macy." "Yeah, Mom," Nate promises. "Well, okay, as long as it's all right with Jonah's parents." Mom and Dad stare back and forth at each other, then they look at me. "Do you want to go?" Dad asks. I nod my head vigorously. "Alrighty then, but Jonah, make sure to be back home tomorrow morning by 10 a.m. We have to go shopping to get some things for the house." I head to my room and pack up my backpack. First, I empty it out onto the floor and toss a pair of pajamas and some of my comics into it. Then I head to the bathroom and rummage through one of the boxes that Dad neatly placed in there. When I find my toothbrush, I throw that into my backpack too, and then head back downstairs to say goodbye to Mom and Dad. The Fullertons stay for another hour talking to my parents, while Nate and I anxiously wait in the living room reading comics. I let out a sigh of relief when they finally started heading to the door. We hop up off of the couch simultaneously and dash toward it laughing as we both grab for the knob at the same time. My dad lets out a laugh and says, "Looks like someone is in a hurry to get out of here." I put on my snow boots and coat and then say goodbye to them, hugging them both. We walk through the snow-covered sidewalk, trying to step into the footsteps that are already there. That way we don't end up with a boot full of cold snow. When we get to the walkway leading to Nate's house, I stand there surprised because it's not what I expected to see. His house doesn't look like any other house in the neighborhood. It's farther back from the street and surrounded by trees on both sides, and it's an ugly brown color. The whole house just looks really dark and gloomy. As we approach the house, suddenly the wind starts to blow wildly, causing me to stumble backwards. After catching my balance, I glance up and see that all of the windows are dark except for one. I see a light on inside and a little girl is standing in the window. Assuming it's Nate's little sister that his parents mentioned, I follow the Fullertons the rest of the way up the sidewalk. When we reach the door, Mrs. Fullerton slides the key into the lock, but then realizes that the door is already open. She glances back at her husband nervously and says, "That's the third time that I locked the door, and when I come home, it's unlocked." He tells her, "Maybe you thought you locked it, or maybe my mom opened it to come outside for some fresh air." She stared at him and replied sternly, "I know I locked it." He stepped in front of her and slowly began to open the door, pushing it inch by inch. Then he walked inside and we all followed him. When we entered the foyer, I shivered. It was extremely cold, even colder than it was outside with the wind blowing. "Don't tell me the heat stopped working again," Mr. Fullerton said, complaining. Nate looks at me and says, "Since we moved in, everything has been breaking down in this old piece of crap." Next, we head to the kitchen where we find Nate's sister sitting at the table slurping down a bowl of soup. His grandma is sitting there too, fussing over her, placing her hand up against her head, checking for a fever. The lights flickered and his grandma told them that it's been happening ever since they left. "Probably because it's so windy out there," Nate said. His grandma looked at him strangely and said, "I haven't heard the wind blowing. The other day when we had that real bad snowstorm and it was really windy, the whole house rattled the entire time. I haven't heard anything today." Nate shrugs his shoulders and proceeds to introduce me to his grandma and his sister Macy. Macy waves and smiles. Her rosy little cheeks look like a squirrel's packed with acorns for the winter. Her and Nate look like they could be twins, except that he's a lot older. They both have the same ash brown hair, but hers is long and curly and Nate has a crew cut. Their eyes are either black or really dark brown. Both of them have an olive skin tone and are tall and lanky just like their dad. They actually look a lot like their father. Mrs. Fullerton has black hair and green eyes, and she's very pale. Nate's grandma stands up and walks over to us, then she pinches my cheek. I have to admit, that was pretty humiliating. My own grandmothers don't even do that to me, so how could she be comfortable doing it? Nate excused the two of us, and he showed me the way up to his bedroom, which was in the attic. Luckily, they already had the cable hooked up at their house, so that way we wouldn't be completely bored out of our minds once we got tired of reading comics. I thought my new room was massive, but his was even bigger than mine. His entire bedroom was covered in all types of comic book posters. I tell him, "This is so cool. You get this whole upstairs all to yourself?" "Yeah," Nate replies, plopping down on his bed. Then he pulls out a plastic container from underneath his bed full of comic books. While I'm removing the lid, I ask, "Have you met any other kids around here our age?" "No, not really. I mostly stay inside and read my comics anyway," he answers while reaching back under the bed and pulling out a second container. When he notices me staring in amazement, he tells me that he's been collecting them ever since he was 6 years old. I hear the sound of something jingling coming up the stairs towards Nate's room. Suddenly his bedroom door swings open, and in strolls a chocolate lab and jumps right up onto his bed, licking his face, obviously excited to see him. "This is my dog Hershey," he says through giggles. I call his name and he runs over to me, then sits, allowing me to pet him. But then he stares behind me and begins to bark at nothing. "What's wrong with your dog?" I ask. Nate shrugs his shoulders and says that he doesn't usually bark, but ever since they moved in a few days ago, Hershey has been barking all of the time. He goes nuts every time he's in here, and the crazy thing is, he barks at absolutely nothing, he tells me, sounding confused. "Get out of here, boy," he shouts after grabbing the dog by the collar and dragging him to the door. Then he calls downstairs to his mom. "Have you seen my baseball mitt? I can't find it anywhere, and I already unpacked all of my boxes." She comes to the bottom of the stairs and shouts back up to him, "Please stop yelling. Your sister is lying down resting. And no, I haven't seen your mitt, but I'm sure we'll find it. You can't play with it out in the snow anyway." He slammed the door and plopped back down on the bed. "So what do you want to do?" I ask him while flipping through one of his Spider-Man comics. He sits up on the bed and a smile lights up his face. "We have to stay in here for now, but once my parents go to sleep, we can sneak down to the basement. That's where my dad keeps his comic book collection. He has all of the good ones, full of blood and gore, the ones that my mom doesn't want me to read." I think to myself, this kid is so cool. We spend the next few hours just hanging out in his room, reading more comics and talking about which ones are our favorites and why. Then we change into our PJs and go down to the kitchen to pop some popcorn. Nate grabs some milk chocolate M&Ms from the cabinet and empties half of the jumbo bag into the bowl. He tells me that this is the only way he'll eat popcorn. I've never had it, but it looks good to me, so I'm willing to give it a try. After heading back up to his room with our popcorn and orange sodas, we choose to watch the new Spider-Man movie, Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, that Nate has on Blu-ray. At around 10 p.m., just when the movie is ending, Nate's parents come in to say goodnight. His mom kisses and hugs him, and then tells me sweet dreams, and then goes to bed. His dad stays for a few minutes and warns us, "Don't you two stay up too late, and don't make a lot of noise unless you want your mother to come back up here." Then he says goodnight as well and heads to bed. 2 hours later, Nate sneaks down the creaky steps pretending he has to use the bathroom, but he's really checking to see if his parents are asleep. When he gets back, he informs me that the coast is clear and that everyone is sleeping. I ask him, "Are you sure? What about your sister and your grandma?" He answers, "My sister is fast asleep in my parents' room, and my grandma must have left and went home earlier tonight because I didn't see her anywhere down there. Come on, let's go." He led the way, showing me where to step on the stairs so that way they didn't creak as much. When we made it to the second floor, we continued to stay as quiet as possible, even though these steps had carpet. When we make it downstairs, we head to the kitchen and he pulls out 2 flashlights from the pantry. Opening the door wasn't a problem, but closing it is. It starts to make a loud squeaky sound. "Just leave it before you wake someone up," I whisper loudly. So Nate just leaves it standing halfway open. When I walk a couple of inches toward the basement door, I stop right there in my tracks. I whisper to Nate, "Did you hear that?" He thought I was joking around, and he continued to walk through the kitchen to the basement. "Nate, seriously, I'm not kidding. I think I heard something." When he realized that I wasn't playing around, he stopped and listened closely. "See, there it is again. Did you hear it this time?" Nate tells me, "Shh. Yeah, I heard it. I've been hearing strange noises ever since we moved in here. My dad says that it's because the house is old. Just ignore it." Then I got an idea. I suggested, "Let's follow it." He reluctantly agreed, so instead of going down to the basement, now we turned around and headed to the living room. It was pitch black down here, besides the light shining from each of our flashlights. I shined mine all around the room, but didn't hear the voices anymore. All I could see were the many knickknacks that Nate's mom had covering her shelves. He told me that they were from her great aunt that had passed away years earlier. Suddenly I began to hear the whispers again. They sounded like they were coming from under the couch. Apparently Nate heard them too, because he dropped to his knees and shined his flashlight underneath there. He jumped back up a second later and said, pointing, "I think I just saw a pair of feet under there." I expected him to burst into laughter, but he looked pretty serious when he said it, and he looked a little frightened too. As much as I didn't want to, I kneeled down and peeked under the couch to confirm what he saw. But I couldn't, because it was empty. I didn't see anything under there. Until I was in the process of getting up and a foot slowly creeped out from under it. It looked like a little kid's foot. The toes were small and they slightly wiggled as I heard a giggle. I jumped up, bumping right into Nate and nearly knocking him over. He let out a loud scream, then quickly covered his mouth with his hand and started to laugh. "I saw it too," I yelled. He told me to be quiet before we woke up his parents, and then we both kneeled down together this time. Whatever we thought we saw was gone now. Even though Nate had seen the feet too, he didn't seem to be that freaked out about it, but I was really creeped out. He started to walk back toward the basement again, and I followed close behind. I began to think that maybe this wasn't such a good idea. I wanted to go back upstairs and watch movies or read comics until I fell asleep. Better yet, I wanted to go home, but I couldn't tell Nate that. He would think that I was the biggest baby ever. Then I saw a shadow on the wall, walking downstairs to the basement. It again reminded me of a child because the shadow was very short. I tapped Nate on the shoulder and asked him, "Did you see that? Do you think it's your sister?" He shrugged and continued to head toward the basement. I grabbed him by the arm, now beginning to panic a little. "Wait, I saw someone going down there. We can't go down there now. What if it was a robber or something? We should wake up your parents so that they can call the cops." When I said that, he spun around quickly and glared angrily at me. Then he warned. I said to be quiet so that we don't wake up my parents. "Now are you coming or not?" He seemed like a different person. This wasn't the same Nate that I'd been hanging out with at my house or upstairs in his room. I wanted more than anything for him to be my friend. So I told him that I would come, and then he opened the door and we proceeded to walk down to the basement. At first I dreaded starting school after winter break, but after Nate and I became friends, I knew that it wouldn't be so bad. I hoped to make more, but I was glad to at least have him for a friend. I only spent that one night at his house, but Nate and I had been hanging out almost every day since we met. My dad drove us to school the first day back, and I had an alright day. Nate and I actually met a kid in our science class that was interested in comics just like us. Chase was reading the Edge of Venomverse comic book while waiting for class to begin when we walked in. Nate immediately approached him and started talking comics, but I was a little more laid back and quiet, so I waited until Nate called me over and introduced me. He eagerly tells Chase, "You should see our collections." Chase was really surprised to see that the two of us collected comic books. He tells us, "I thought that was a thing nerds did. Everyone always makes fun of me for it." Nate surprises me when he invites Chase to spend the night at his house that weekend. I know he's trying to be nice, but he doesn't even know the kid. At least he came over to my house and our parents got the chance to meet each other before he invited me over. Nate tells him that the three of us can all bring our comic book collections over and hang out. I'm very hesitant to go back over there after what happened the last time, but I don't want to seem uncool. Chase says that he'll ask his parents tonight and let us know tomorrow. After science, when everyone was making their way out the door into the hallway, I asked Nate, "Will your parents be okay with you inviting someone over that they've never even met?" He says, "My mom is going away for the weekend with my little sister, so it'll only be me and my dad home. He doesn't care who I have over." "You're coming, right?" he asks me. Was it that obvious? Could he sense my hesitation? I tell him, "I'm not sure. Dad needs my help cleaning up the garage this weekend." "Aw, come on, you have to come." "Why don't I help? That way you guys will get done faster, and then he'll surely let you spend the night." I tell him that I'll talk to my dad tonight about it and get back to him tomorrow. After school that day, Mom picks me up and asks me how my first day went. "I made a new friend. This kid named Chase. He's into comics too." She smiles from ear to ear. "That's wonderful, honey. I knew you would like it here." Then I ask her if it would be alright if I stayed at Nate's house again this weekend. "Again? Why don't you give them some time to get settled?" I tell her that Chase is supposed to be coming too, and she says that she'll talk to my dad about it. When I get home, I head to the kitchen for a snack. After rummaging through the refrigerator and finding nothing that interests me, I open the freezer and grab a bag of pepperoni pizza rolls. I throw a handful onto a pan and pop it in the oven. Mom told me that the cable company finally showed up this morning, so I turn on the TV in the living room and breathe a sigh of relief when I see the Cartoon Network logo. I head back into the kitchen to check on my pizza rolls, and they are just about done, so I retrieve a glass from the cabinet and pour myself some lemonade. After I place the pizza rolls on a plate, I head back to the living room and plop down on the couch. After I finished eating and gulped down my lemonade, then I laid down on the couch and got comfortable. I vaguely remember watching an episode of Teen Titans, and then I saw Mom walk by and cover me up with a blanket. Then I started to doze off. "Nate, don't touch that. We don't even know what it is," I warned him when we reached the bottom of the basement stairs. My eyes searched frantically for the shadow that I'd seen come down here, but there was no sign of it anywhere. I grabbed Nate by the arm as he continued to reach toward the open door in the basement. It led down a long corridor to another door. "Let's follow it. This wasn't here before. I want to see what's down here," he suggests while already heading down the corridor. I call his name again and again, but all I can see is his shadow getting further and further away. Then I start to hear the same loud voices that we heard upstairs in the living room. They surround me, and then I feel someone's hand on my back, and the next thing I know, I'm flying down the corridor after Nate. I don't see anything except an extremely bright white light. Then I hear a door slam behind me in the distance. I wake up sweating and jump up off of the couch, looking around frantically, checking to make sure that I'm not actually in Nate's basement. "Are you okay?" Dad asks me, standing at the front door. He must have just gotten home from work, which was the sound of the door that I heard slamming. I tell him that I'm fine, that I just had a bad dream, and then we head to the kitchen for dinner. Mom asks Dad about me sleeping over at Nate's on Saturday, and he says sure, it's alright with him. That night, I can't get to sleep. I just keep thinking about what we saw down there in Nate's basement. I never told anyone about it. Not that I had any friends to tell, besides Nate, who was already there. But I definitely didn't tell my parents. Mom would worry herself to death, and I honestly don't think that my dad would believe me. He usually doesn't. The next day at school, when we get to science class, Chase comes up to Nate and I, and he seems really excited. He tells us that his parents said he could come over, but that they would need the address so that they could drop him off and meet Nate's parents. Well, my mom won't be there, and my dad will be at work until late. But what if we all meet up over at Jonah's and they can meet his parents instead? Nate suggests, glancing over at me, waiting for me to agree. I tell him, "Yeah, you can meet at my house, but like I told you already, I'm not sure if I can spend the night. I've got to help my dad." Nate completely ignores me and starts talking to Chase. "We can even sneak to the basement while my dad's at work and take a peek at his comic collection," he tells him with a smile. Chase's eyes light up and he nods his head. "That sounds awesome." As soon as Nate mentions his basement, I already know that I'm not planning on staying over there again. I just had to come up with something to tell him. My helping my dad clean the garage excuse would no longer work because now Nate was coming over there to help. So I had to think of something else, but no way was I going back down there. I wanted to warn Chase, but I knew Nate would get mad about it. After school that day, Dad picked me up, and as we drove to the hardware store, I told him that I changed my mind about going to Nate's on Saturday. "Sorry, bud, but Mom and I already made plans to go out Saturday night. We're going to dinner with my boss and his wife, and we've already had to cancel on them once before. I can't do it again." I try to compromise. "I can just stay home by myself. It's only for a few hours." But Dad tells me, "You know your mother will never agree to that." "Please, Dad," I plead. He looks at me worried and asks, "Is everything okay?" Did something happen the last time you were over there? I assure him that everything is fine. I just changed my mind about going over there, that's all. When we get home, Dad talks to Mom about me staying home alone instead of going to Nate's on Saturday. Absolutely not. You have no way to contact us if something happens. I tell her that I could just run to one of the neighbors' houses if there's an emergency, which I'm sure there wouldn't be. But there's no changing her mind. You told Nate and Chase that you were going to come over, so now that's what you're going to do, she tells me sternly. I know that's her final answer, and I know better than to ask anymore. So that Saturday, Nate comes over bright and early to help clean up the garage. I'm still sitting at the table in my pajamas eating breakfast, so he and Dad head out there without me. Once I finish eating and get dressed, I stroll out there to see that the two of them have already gotten started. After working for a few hours and making pretty good progress, we have a huge pile of trash that needs to be hauled to the curb. So Nate and I go around to the backyard to get the trash cans. Why are you acting so funny? He asks me. You're never this quiet. I tell him that I'm just tired, and then we head back to the garage and start piling the trash into the cans. When we're done, my dad hands us each $20. That cheers me up, because I wasn't expecting to get paid at all. Nate goes home, and then later that night, I pack my bags to go over to his house. At 8 p.m., my parents drop me off in front of his house and then pull away. I'm tempted to just go back home and sneak in through the broken window in our basement, but Chase pulls up right at that second. His parents stopped by Nate's yesterday after school. That way they had the chance to meet his mom before she went out of town. So they dropped him off, and there we both stood on the sidewalk outside of Nate's house, each of us holding a box carrying our comics. I thought about telling him about the basement, but didn't get the chance because Nate comes outside to his front porch and waves at us, telling us to come on. Chase speed walks to the door, but I take my time. When I reach the porch, we go inside, but just walking through the front door terrifies me. There's just something about this house. I'm surrounded by freezing cold as soon as I get inside. I let out a sigh and can see my breath floating away in front of me. As we head straight upstairs to Nate's room, the lights start to excessively flicker. Your parents still didn't get that fixed? I asked. He told me that they have both been busy working, so that they hadn't gotten the chance yet. We spend the next few hours up in Nate's room reading and swapping comics, and at around 10:30 I head downstairs to use the bathroom. While I'm in there, I hear someone right outside the door. I think it's probably the guys trying to scare me, or maybe Nate's dad just getting off of work. Nate did say that he'd be home around 11. I finish my business and flush the toilet, then I wash my hands and cautiously open up the bathroom door. I step out, expecting Nate or Chase to jump out and scare me half to death, but the hall is dark and silent. As I turn back around and flick on the bathroom light switch, the bulb blows out. Great, I think to myself. So I feel my way down the hall towards the stairway that leads up to Nate's bedroom, and once I get a couple of feet, I hear someone walking behind me. The footsteps are only tiny pitter-patters, but I can definitely hear them. Fear washes over me and I race to the end of the hall to flick on the light down there. Once it's illuminated, I see a single file line of dolls sitting in the hallway in front of the bathroom, and each is wielding a different object in their hand. One has a plastic knife, another has a pair of kitty scissors, and the third has a toothpick. I can't quite see what the last two are holding, but I can only imagine. I make it up the stairs to Nate's room and slam the door, but Nate and Chase are gone. Nate's dog Hershey is in there barking his head off at something, but I'm not sure what because the room is completely empty. I open the door and the dog darts out of there and downstairs, so I follow him, hoping that he'll lead me to Nate. The hallway is empty now, so I dash through as quickly as possible and continue to follow close behind Hershey. He leads me to the place that I dreaded, the basement. The door is closed and he just stands there barking non-stop. The lights begin to flicker again, and I debate whether to go through the basement door or just to run out the front door. I should just go home and sit on the porch and wait for my parents. But something grabs me forcefully by my foot and pulls me toward the basement. The door swings open, and I was too scared to look back. All I can see is the same bright white light flooding the entire basement, and now it's cascading up the stairs into the kitchen. Through my screams, I faintly hear Nate and Chase calling out my name. I scream back at them, "I'm here! I'm here!" Then they come running around the corner from the living room and see me holding onto the door panel for dear life. As soon as they see me, the light disappears and whatever has a hold of my foot lets go and I drop, banging my head onto the basement stairs. They walk over and now I'm crying because I'm terrified. "Nice job trying to scare us. That was pretty good," Chase says, laughing. "Something's really down there. I'm not kidding. It tried to drag me away," I frantically scream at them. Nate glances down the stairs and says, "There's nothing down there. I can't believe you're getting so worked up over nothing. Come on, I'll show you," he tells Chase, leading the way. Chase follows him, and I scream after them to stop, but they just turn back and laugh, calling me a big baby. When they get to the bottom of the steps, I race down there after them. Nate is already opening the other door in the basement. The white light blinds me, and when it finally disappears, Nate and I are the only ones left standing down there. I ask him, "Where did Chase go?" A sinister smile crosses Nate's face as he points at the door. "Let's see if he can find his way back like you did." As soon as he said that, it all made sense. That first time I spent the night at his house and he lured me down into the basement, he disappeared. I thought he'd gone down the corridor, but I knew I'd felt a hand shove me down it too. He was the one who pushed me. I don't know whose shadow I had seen down there, but I think it was another one of his victims. As soon as I heard his dad's voice at the top of the stairs, I ran up them, out the front door, and down the block to my house. My parents find me waiting on the porch, freezing, in nothing but my pajamas when they get home around 1 a.m. When I explain to them what happened, they look at me in disbelief, and then my dad marches down the street to Nate's house with me in tow. He wants to prove to me that whatever I think I saw was just a dream. He pounds on the door and Mr. Fullerton answers it in his robe and slippers, rubbing the sleep from his eyes. "Is everything all right?" "Jonah, I thought you were upstairs with the boys asleep." My dad butts in and tells him that I think I saw something in his basement. Then he asks, "Do you mind if I take a look?" Mr. Fullerton steps aside and welcomes us in. Then he leads the way to the basement. Once we all get down there, I look around in shock. The door that had just been there hours ago was gone. The basement was empty besides some boxes. "Dad, I swear I saw..." "Jonah, that's enough. Let's go home." "I'm sorry to wake you, Mr. Fullerton," my dad says, apologizing. When we get back home, he's very angry with me. "Is this what you pulled just because your mother and I told you that you had to go over there tonight?" I storm upstairs yelling, "You never believe me." The next day at school, Nate and I keep our distance from one another. Chase wasn't there either, but no one seemed to notice. The teacher just marked him down as being absent. Over the next few years, I had a hard time making friends. I just don't trust many people anymore. And the few friends that I do have, I never spend the night at their house. However, Nate didn't have any trouble. He was befriending a new kid every month, and each time one would disappear, he'd just move on and make another one. I knew he was inviting them over to his house to spend the night and seeing if they could find their way out of his basement. And out of how many kids that I've noticed gone missing, I'm the only one. Subscribe for a new story Mondays, Wednesdays, and don't forget Saturdays. See you next time on
Nina's Nightmares.
Really? You're supposed to click the like button, not me. Ugh.